to being your host this morning as we gather together as we do on Sunday mornings. We are delighted to have you as our special guest this morning. For those of us who are joining us for the first time, our show, the presentation that we do, is all about inquiry. We start with the idea of a central question that we hope will bring out and appeal to all of those things that you're thinking about transformations in your own life. We take a question, we allow people who are in the chat to interact with us, but the whole reason that we are here on Sunday mornings is to speak to what's emerging around a central issue. And so this week, our question is, what's right about this situation that I'm not seeing? So what we find is that there's a lot of people who are kind of stuck in negative thinking patterns and sometimes stuck in those patterns again. We're taught along the way to focus on what's going wrong in our lives, and then turning to somebody outside ourselves for an explanation as to how we should be thinking, right? And we've been deeply conditioned to do all of this problem solving, be able to focus on what's broken. There are people who call themselves, I'm a problem solver, But what we're inviting you to take a look at this morning is what's right about this situation that I'm not seeing. And we're going to be talking a little bit about a 180 flip about how you can, again, from a safe space, be able to sort of look at what those possibilities that are emerging. So as we go through the discussion today, if some of the information that we're talking about evokes something with you and you'd like to be able to sort of have your thoughts and perspective as a part of the conversation, we invite you to put those comments in the chat because we build our central inquiry around a discussion. And with me this morning to discuss our question this week, I have in the center, I feel like we're on Hollywood Squares. In the center circle is Sang D, and across from me is Ray G. So we've got Sang D and Ray G. So how are you guys this morning? Good morning.
Excellent.
I am dandy, like everyone's favorite candy.
Well, with us, as like I said, to kind of like get this conversation is the idea of introducing. I will tell you a little bit with the origin of this particular question for me. I think that sometimes we can be presented with something going on in our lives, and there it is again. It's come up. Let me try to see if I can mentally sort of solve it. But unfortunately, we tend to then just always focus on what the problems are, right? Mm-hmm. And then we focus on the solutions to those problems, which are then largely based on what we've experienced before, right? So what if we could actually apply a different technique? I was sharing a little bit about this with Ray earlier in the week, and I said, has Ray has anybody ever said to you, I'm going to play devil's advocate with you for a while?
Who doesn't say that? Everyone says it. I love it. I'm like, okay, let's do it.
Well, what if we could instead kind of play the angel's advocate here? What if we could just kind of flip it around and say, what's right about this situation that I'm not seeing? Because, when somebody plays devil's advocate with me, I always feel like they're going to bring every criticism and every problem, and I'm just going to feel less and less and less in that situation. Mm-hmm. Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah. I'll say is it okay if I jump in, Ray?
Oh, yeah.
Please. Oh, absolutely. Please.
I will say I always get a chuckle. I'm not going to lie. I get a chuckle when someone says, can I play devil's advocate? I'm like, knock yourself out. Right? Because I'm willing to listen to hear their perspective. Right. And then I get to decide whether that works for me. And, and sometimes, there are times when people say that, and I don't even know where that phrase came from. So if somebody could look that up, that'd be great. Because I always like to see where things derive from. Like, where did we even get that phrase, right? Like, where did it even start? Because that kind of helps us understand, too, where does that even come into play? But I like to listen, and then I will go, okay. And then if something sticks with me, then it could be something for me to address. But ultimately, it's about knowing self and going, okay. But then I also try to offer a what if, right? What if this? Because if anything I've learned from one of my mentors is that everything is figure outable. We've just, you know, Marie Forleo said that a long time ago, right? And that's where I took it from. And then there's actually there's a gluten-free bakery that has it in the shop. And when I tell you when I went in there, it was great. But anyway, I'm going to go off on a tangent. Just there's always something to figure out. And it's just a matter of figuring out what works for you. I know we've talked about this a lot over the last couple of weeks. And it's kind of the same thing. I think being willing to listen to somebody instead of automatically having your defenses up and going, you know, and just saying, you know what, allow me to listen and see what they have to say, because they're sharing from their experience. And then I then get to decide how my experience fits into theirs, or if it's even an alignment like that.
Yeah. There's so much in what you just said. I want to pick up on one thing that you began with. Ray, do you want to talk a little bit about the origins of why people go into the devil's advocate mode so often?
I think it's the structure that we live in. Is the world is and you said so many things saying I agree with Jamie. We got to loop back to several of them.
The whole entire show now has been said by what you said.
Well, you beautifully did it. In essence, you embodied and you added context to you already have flipped the situation. Because in some ways, when somebody says, let me play the devil's advocate, is they're essentially trying to take control of the dialogue, of the discussion, or the situation. You shattered that by saying, I will select or determine, which is the beauty. Is determine whether that's suitable for where I want to go. But it's also inclusive because you're letting the person express their view. So then you broke the paradigm. So now it's an open discussion,
right?
Not a closed.
Right.
I didn't quite answer it, but that's one aspect. We're going to loop back.
Yeah, we're going to loop back. And this is one of the many reasons why I love Ray, because one of the things that you begin to realize is it's so great to have somebody observe what you're doing, right? And that's sort of, to me, the angel's advocate. It's switching from this idea of what's wrong, in a situation. And we're so keen to be able to name the problem. So I'm going to go sit with somebody who's going to take control of the situation and rub her nose in the problems, right? This is what you need to do, and this is what you need to do. And again, sometimes that can be helpful, but most of the time it takes away our power to be able to discern what's right and correct for us, right? And so that's where I think that 180 perspective allows you to purposely say, well, wait, how could there possibly be anything right with this situation, right? But that turnaround allows you to get that fresh perspective. And what Ray so beautifully illustrated with you saying is that you gain that self-awareness, you gain that self-compassion to treat yourself better. And from there, from there, you get a perspective. I haven't even read this comment, but I'm going to bring it in because I just want to see.
It's a long one.
I'm going to disagree with that, Ray. I don't necessarily use the phrase devil's advocate, but I often offer multiple perspectives.
Absolutely. And I will say everything, if we take everything instead of automatically putting a barrier up, right? Because we automatically want to put defenses up. When people start saying something, we automatically want to go, oop, like, get away from me. And we want to be defensive. But I love that something that you said, Jamie, when you said people say you need to do this. That's my favorite phrase, right? Because then I say, that's really adorable. That's what I say in my head. And then I go, well, why do you think I need that? Because it's always interesting to see what they see. Because I get to live in my shoes. You get to live in your shoes. But I'm curious why you think I need something, right? And maybe from their experience, they may see that I need something, and I may not even be aware that I may need that something. So it's always just open for that inquiry, right? And being a place of curiosity. Like I don't know if you guys, did y'all get a book about life?
No.
Okay. I didn't either. And I didn't get one about parenting. Okay. So we're all kind of learning this together. So I do love that just being calm and coming from, instead of getting defensive, just asking and
Right.
being curious about someone else's mind instead of automatically putting up the defenses for ourselves.
Right. But what you just did and what Jessica has offered in the chat is
Mhm.
beginning to offer alternatives,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, where choice is the rule. So oftentimes, again, when we ask people to play devil's advocate, we're asking them to again take control, and then make the decision for us. But what you again illustrated saying was when I answer a question with a question, right? You've gone back to inquiry because you still want to discover what's there. And just like Jessica is to say, was saying, in a little bit in the chat, that it's not about control, right? Sometimes when you offer solutions to other people, what you're doing in that moment is providing alternatives,
Mhm.
just like the 180 flip does.
Right.
But you'd be surprised, and I'm sure this is not going to surprise anyone, how many people aren't really offering you alternatives. They're
Mhm.
offering you opinions about what works for them. And then they want to be able to say, well, you didn't do what I told you to do. You,
That's my favorite too.
and you didn't even take
Well,
the advice.
yeah, well, I will always say this is another thing that I like to do, because everyone, if we know, and everyone wants to feel loved, heard, and seen, right? And so when someone's going to offer a devil's advocate or perspective or something, I always appreciate, and I tell them, I appreciate you sharing that, because there's that level of thank you for sharing that with me, right? That gratitude. And then again, inviting, right? So it's like this, and not there's, I know we live in a world of or, do you want this or that? But can I have dessert and dinner? But can I have dessert first and then dinner? I eat dessert first. But it's thanking them for their perspective, and that way they also feel more comfortable sharing, because you haven't put up the barrier
Yeah.
and you've created a safe space for them to share. You just got to remember, because we also, for self, remember not to get defensive and to continue to allow them to share. Because the moment you feel triggered by something, it's then your opportunity to either say, hey, you know what, I got to stop this conversation, or shift it somehow, right? But this is where you have to be aware of your own self to determine how you're going to shift that around.
Yeah. I just want to add a bit to that because
Mhm.
there's two dynamics happening here. What is the structure of the container or the space?
Mhm. Mhm.
When someone says devil's advocate, I think the origin of the statement is way back when is let me be contrarian to what you just said. So
Mhm.
that is in some ways, as what you just said, saying it's I'm challenging you, not I'm trying to create a share a perspective. So in some ways, it's the structure and then the language of it. What you just did is you demonstrated an open desire to get another perspective and also to shift the language that is an open language, not one that it is restrictive to say as a criticism. So it is a structural thing, the expression and metaphors can be used to define what you're trying to do. But the
Mhm.
dilemma and saying, we've had this discussion before, language is important
Yeah.
because your meaning that you attribute to a term, an idea, will be different than everyone else in the room, in the space, because that's what language is for. There's another thing that we can do later on is what is the dilemma behind language in the 21st century?
Mhm.
Is because certain dominance of ideas will say this is what the meaning is. But
Mhm.
if you last checked in the English language and you look up any word or whatever language, there's multiple meanings in multiple contexts.
Right. So I just looked up where this derived from. And it's actually because I really do like to understand, where did we even start this, right? Where did
It's
this
an imagery and it's a concept essentially.
Mhm. Well, it looks like it says it started in 1587,
Okay.
right?
What happened on that date?
I have no idea, but it says devil's advocate came from the Catholic Church.
Ooh,
It
danger,
says,
danger.
yeah, and it says in Latin it's listen, I haven't taken Latin in such a long time, so bear with me. Advocatus diaboli, which is literally advocate of the devil.
Of the
It
devil.
says from there, the phrase broadened into modern everyday meaning, someone taking an opposing view to test an argument, even if
Yes.
they don't personally believe it. So I think one knowing, and again, it's like, again, what we're talking about in modern day language, right? Where people want to poke holes at your journey, or they want to like nitpick, right? And again, if you even ask them, well, where did you hear that from? What is that? What does devil's advocate mean to you? Because
Exactly.
there's all that, again, coming from a place of understanding. Where where did you first learn about that? Right? Because I could tell you so many stories about where I've learned certain things, but I will say no one's ever said, let me tell you about the angel's advocate over here on this shoulder. Right? They always talk about these angels and the angel on one side and devil on the other, but I only hear about the one on the devil, right? I don't ever hear anybody say, what does the angel say on the other side? So, but really understanding where that language comes from, and then looking, I think, where it derived and how it evolved.
It's always changing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
again, understanding when you're not clear, or you say, I want to play devil's advocate, you say, okay, also tell me, what does that mean when you say devil's advocate?
But see, again, you're bringing everything back to inquiry, which is
Yeah.
what's really important, because it's through that inquiry, just as Jessica's saying in the chat, that you look at the meaning. Because, if you're just joining us right now, we are talking about, our question this week is, what's right about this that I'm not seeing? Problem for me, but continue to focus on that problem.
Mhm.
And again, it's so much in our culture is built around, well, I'm going to ask Sang, she seems to be able to solve problems. And, we set ourselves up for gurus, and all these other things. Whereas, it's the conundrum. If I brought a problem based on what Sang is saying, oh, I guess they couldn't hear me over the graphic.
Yeah, I couldn't either. Well, I couldn't either, so I didn't know what that was, but I
Oh,
thought maybe it was a
it must be a settings thing because I
I
heard
oh,
the audio.
Absolutely. And this is the wonderful thing about being live, right?
hey,
Um,
I love it. I
um,
love it here.
So you demonstrated, Jamie, you paused so people
Yeah,
could
there was a
immerse
pause, right.
themselves
I,
in
I
the
lit
graphic.
that magnitude there.
It was good.
Um, so, and again, here's an interesting thing. What's right about this situation that I'm seeing, and I'm not seeing, is I did just now did something in the moment, right? That was a possible problem, right?
Right.
But what did it allow? It allowed for a pause. It
Yeah.
allows for people to kind of focus on the now. Did they go into the what's wrong thinking, like what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong? Or was this an opportunity for people to see what's right about this? Maybe I needed to spend a little bit of time having the question.
Yeah.
But to circle back to the whole idea of the angel's advocate versus the devil's advocate, as long as you can continue to stay in that inquiry and in the possibilities, as opposed to you know um, always focusing on what I did wrong, I need to fix this, it's broken. We get all of that wonderful new information, that new feedback,
Yeah.
focusing on the possibilities. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, what's interesting is that we could probably expand the theme to beyond problem solving and advocates that are either negative or positive, because what Sang brought up was essentially through inquiry and perspective. It's not problems narrow things down. Oh, there's something broken in the kitchen, rather than that's one element in a silo or outside of the context of something else. But when we come to people, people are not problems to be solved. People's lives are complicated. Complexity lives large everywhere. And I think through inquiry, what Sang was saying is if you open up that perspective, the person then has to set a context. Well, this is what I mean by advocate. This is what I mean by when I share this with you, and then the person can respond back. So I think what's happening here is look at the positive and the negatives together, not separately.
Can I introduce a 180 flip right now in this moment?
It's your
Please.
show. Do what you want.
Yes.
Well, I want to say something that has happened to me sometimes when I've done the Angel's Advocate, and people will say to me, "Oh, you're just making that up. You just made up that solution right now, right? Like you're ignoring the reality of the situation. You should stay focused on what's wrong. Here you are, Jamie, coming up with some kind of completely different idea, but we need to deal with the problem at hand." Has that ever happened with you where somebody just really wants to rub your nose in the problem as if
No, Jamie, you're the only one that's ever happened to. Doesn't happen to me. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. Who doesn't want to tell somebody they should be doing something? Or, again, going back to the you need, again, my favorite things to be told. Okay. And I think another thing I wanted to address is when we put up those defenses, because we feel judged.
Yes.
Okay. And when we feel judged, we automatically want to defend our mind, our choices, our decisions. But when you are confident in the choices that you make, right, and someone comes with that, it's also much smoother to receive their perspective.
Yep.
Right. And if we look at it as their perspective instead of their opinion, right, because they're only sharing from their lived experience.
Correct.
Right, because I am a short lady with big feet, so I don't know that most people can wear my shoes anyway, right? But this is why they talk about, everybody walks in their own shoes. Everybody has their own journey. The three of us have all three walked a very different journey, not to mention that we are different genders, right? But we've all walked a different journey. However, whatever life we decide to live on, right? Whatever path we decide to live on, whichever, decisions we make. And I think knowing that every decision that we've made up to this point has gotten us to where we are, and I think owning that, right? And that everything again is figure outable. We've got to figure out now what works for us in this day, today, and by not allowing that external piece, because we have a lot of stuff going on up here, right? But we get so charged up, emotionally charged up by external people telling us, you should do this. Well, you should have did that. And you should have did that. Just hand them a roll of toilet paper and say, okay. Sounds good.
I like it. Props.
I always got some props.
Well, and what you're talking about saying is the development of a muscle.
Yes.
It's not just a moment where somebody can, like I want to be able to, again, my deep conditioning is to find solutions outside myself, to bring my problem to a problem solver who's going to help me further identify what the problem is. And we're going to focus on my problems, right? Because we need to address my problems before anything can happen. But what you're inviting us to consider, and what this inquiry today is inviting us to consider, is that there's a moment. There's a moment when you get to that and you practice the flip, right? But that flip is actually a muscle, right? So I'm sure the first time when somebody said, hey, Sang, you should probably do this, you probably went into a reaction and said, well, I guess they're right. Maybe I should, And so it takes a while to develop that muscle. And one of the things that I think is really, really important for people to understand about these discussions is that we're talking about a somatic sort of way of being, right? So that it's not just some kind of thing that you just, oh, well, I know this mental trick, right? I'm sure that your body now, when somebody says, hey, Sang, I think you should be doing this, your body knows how to respond to that question.
Oh, yeah. Because my mind goes, oh, that's really cute. Let me hear more. Like it used to, and I'm not going to lie, it used to be, there was an automatic, I felt judged. I felt this. Right. And I think me being able to own and know, I'm going to be judged regardless. I'm going to tell you right now, I've been judged since I was 3, right? It's a different story for different days because there's probably 20,000 stories in there. I can still get judged today, right? I was just somewhere today and judged good or bad. Who knows? They're always going to talk about you, right? People are always going to say something. People are always going to have something to think. And one of my favorite stories is when I was giving a speech and I got off stage. Now I've been a single mom my entire life. My kids are grown. And I get off the stage and this lady says, "Well, wouldn't your life be so much better with a husband?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I don't know." And I said, "How's that working out for you?" Right? But it wasn't a place of like, it was like, "Why are you asking me that?
Right.
You don't know anything about what I've been through or any of my journey, but you decided you wanted to ask me a provoking question that you thought you were going to rile me up with, only for me to go, how's that working out for you?
Right.
Because why
But
would you come at me like that?"
again, what you've just so beautifully demonstrated is you gave yourself the space in that moment to not go into an automatic response that was disingenuous to who you are.
Right.
And I think that that's why I'm going back to this. This is the idea of a muscle. It's real easy. Again, if you're just joining us, we're discussing today what's right about this that I'm not seeing, and we're talking about this as from our perspective. There's been times when we've been able to find that moment, right? To be okay with something that's gone wrong again, if you will. But these things can be applied in very simple ways in our daily life. If you're stuck in traffic and you've really got to get somewhere and you know that there's really nothing else that you can do in that particular moment other than be in traffic, what's right about this that I'm not seeing, right? Now you can say, well, I'm an idiot. This always happens to me. I'm late all the time. I'm a loser. People are going to, and all you are is just going through, you're playing that devil's advocate because obviously if you were having this problem, right, that it needs to be solved on that type of a mental level. But wait, what's in this moment right now that I'm experiencing? What do I get to choose? Just like saying so brilliantly said when someone came at her and said, how much better your life would be if you were married. There's that moment, where you're just going to go, oh, well, let me offer up this perspective, right? And I was telling Ray before we started the show today, I noticed this morning when I went out to an appointment already that I couldn't find my wallet, right? Which in a different world would have sent me into an immediate panic as to where the heck is that? Why am I always losing it? Why am I misplacing it? Now, in full disclosure, it's right here. But I went to one of the stores where I had been yesterday to kind of go take a look at to where it might have been. And I kept thinking, well, it'd be horrible if I had to, go get my driver's license replaced and have to call on the credit cards. But what was right about that moment that I wasn't seeing is, it allowed me to be perfectly calm in a situation that ordinarily would have troubled me because I was going to focus on what I could do. Again, going back to what Sang was talking about, what is it that I can do? Well, I'll probably have to go down to the DMV and do all of that. And it's just you're recognizing, oh wait, there's a survival strategy there that I'm focused on. But I have a choice as to how do I respond to this.
Absolutely.
And so it's an opportunity to create that muscle again.
Jessica's so cute. She said, I sat here for 29 minutes wondering if you found it or not.
Yeah, because I had run into Jessica earlier, and I said, I'm going to go over to the shop where I was yesterday, and I was hoping it was there.
That's funny.
And so you can follow, you can listen for the feedback in the moment, but you start with that idea of self-compassion and self-empowerment rather than, oh my God, I'm in a problem again. Why is this keeping happening to me again? I've got to go solve this problem, right? At that problem level, because things wouldn't come up if I didn't have problems. Well, wait, what's right about this that I'm not seeing? Because, one of the questions that we're going to do one of these weekends, what if there's nothing wrong with you? What There's nothing wrong with you. And they're companion questions, right?
Right.
What's emerging?
Well, and I will say, if we look at not just nothing's wrong with me, but nothing's wrong with anyone. Everyone is walking in their own path, right? They're again, everyone's only sharing their lived experience. Sometimes people will like we have a like especially family members. I'm going to say this, especially family members. Like, family members are really quick to be like, you should do this and you should do that. And then we want to get defensive because like, you know me, I shouldn't want to do that. And if we remember, they're coming from a place of love, right? They're actually, if we look at it from that perspective, if someone, especially family members, because I know that's the ones that really tug at our hearts the most when we feel judged by a family member, they're coming from a place of love based off of their experience. They want what's best for us, and sometimes they may not be able to communicate it in a way that we receive it well, right? And so again, being able to go, okay, let me take a step back. Okay, yep, all right, this is how they love, right? And you could go through the 5 love languages, things like that, however you want, but understanding that they show up, it could be through their occupation, it could be through how they show up with their own families, right? Because there's been several instances where I've felt judged by my own family members, but I take a step back and go, now don't get me wrong, in the beginning, in the onset, it was like, what, are you kidding me, and then I would shut down, right? So by no means is this like, oh, I just woke up one day and I was like this. Okay, so that I don't want anybody getting twisted about anything.
Right.
But understanding that they're asking, or sometimes their statements, especially from family members, come from an inquiry of love because they want something for us from their eyes, right? And then again, it's up to us to go, well, what does that mean to you when you want this for me?
Well, what you're talking about, saying again, is the idea of angles
Yes.
in this situation. We talk about the 180 flip, right?
Mhm.
But maybe there's a different perspective over here. There's different angles for the same flip. Do you want to speak to that, Ray?
Well, I think what's interesting, what's saying, and you have brought up, is it's never what it is. It's never what it looks like on the surface.
Correct.
So it's a starting point, and that's what I love about what you said. Saying it's the opportunity. Pause. What are they really talking about? Are they talking about themselves? Are they criticizing me? Or are they looking for some kind of affirmation from you or some
Mhm.
kind of response that's going to make them feel better? So if you start looking at, okay, from a different perspective of rather than just responding viscerally, negatively,
Sure.
you get to look at it from, what does that really mean?
Mhm.
And what could I offer? And that's the beauty of the situation. What could you offer in that given situation?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think again, going back to that question, like what you were saying, right, is asking them, well, when you say that to me, what does that mean to you? What does that look like for me, for you? Right? Because again, they may be seeing something that I'm not seeing.
And there's another part of that too, which is that again, this is for our own self-awareness. It may not be the best moment to choose to self-correct someone who's coming
Mhm.
at us with something.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Sometimes I sit with it.
because we want you to focus on your own shift. I'm building on something that Jessica was sort of expressing in the chat because it can be really assaulting.
Yeah.
Well, uh, I love you so much that I'm going to tell you something, or I have to do all the hard work and begin to see what you're coming at me, even though I don't like you, is very a loving gesture. That's a lot of gymnastics to expect a lot of people to get to. But what we're inviting is to do exactly what you came to at the end of that thought process, which is um, I have to be able to take what is happening to me through my own perspective.
Right.
There's a very famous analogy that I could say, saying that scarf you're wearing, purple has always been one of my least favorite colors. And every time I see you wearing purple, I hate purple. Well, now wait a second. As you look at the screen, Sang's not wearing purple. She's wearing red. And so she's very solid in what she's doing because it's like, well, wait, you're saying something about me which I know not to be true about myself. And if we're not in a situation where we talked about the importance of the pause, right? We
Mhm.
talked about initially the idea that, you know, we want to make sure that we've gone through this whole journey, when we were looking last week, I want to make sure I get the correct, you know, um, what if we stayed in discomfort long enough without rushing to fix it, right?
Hmm.
Mhm.
That's that pause, right? Okay, I can hear my brother or my sister coming at me again, or I can hear this person who, when I see them every day, accuses me something about I know not to be true for myself. So the what we're inviting you right now is to recognize that shift is in here, not, I mean, again, if you're in a situation where there's somebody who is being abusive to you, we're not trying to say we want you to step out of the way of the bus. But oftentimes these shifts, what Sang is demonstrating, what Ray's talking about, what I'm talking about, is a shift in our own internal compass, so that we know, you know what, I can hear you for what you're saying. I'm not wearing a red scarf, or I'm not wearing a purple scarf. I'm wearing a red scarf. I can stay in what I need to be true, and then I can hear you and not be thrown off, because I'm able to work from just what we've been talking about, a different perspective that I have about myself.
Mhm.
So
What's even more funny is this is a pink scarf.
Ah, we're gonna have
So
to
it's not
color correct these
I
right.
computers.
So
I
it's nor purple nor red, however, it is pink. But
right,
but again, it's all about perspective,
yeah,
right? Like
right,
again, we can all look at the same thing and go, I don't like that. Or, it's like when everybody looks at a car accident, right, on the highway. Everybody wants to see, is everybody okay? But like, what are we really looking at? Right. Um, but everybody, and I was talking to my brother about this yesterday, where everybody could see an accident, but there's different angles of the accident, right? And based on where you're standing, or where you are in a car, or where you are in a vehicle, you're going to see a different part of that accident that maybe someone else did not see.
mm-hmm,
Hmm.
mm-hmm.
Because
Ray,
yeah, I totally agree. Is because we have our own unique way of seeing things.
Hmm.
So there's so many judgments where everybody's supposed to be thinking the same, but
Hmm.
we're all coming at from a slightly different perspective or angle, and I
right,
think that's one of the things. And back to our muscle is to exercise the muscle for the pause, for the being with the discomfort,
Hmm.
and using it appropriately. And it does require effort, because you said a couple of things that are, like, don't be triggered immediately. Like, try to build that level of confidence within yourself to resist going down the road you don't want to go.
Yeah,
right.
much easier said than done. Yeah, I was going to say, could you
Yes, oh, absolutely.
Yeah, could you put that up? Because I have a story. Listen, guys, stories for days, okay? So I want to share a story about this because your kids are very important. My kids are very important too. Everyone's kids are important. My daughter was in the 8th grade, and she's been a dancer since she was 3. She's still dancing and performing. And there was a new dance team being formed, right? And she's a stellar dancer. Like, she's gone to ballet, she's done all the things, right? So she goes to this workshop because all her friends were doing it. And she goes in there, and it's like a 2-day workshop, and then they got to have these tryouts and all this stuff, da, da. Well, she goes the first day. She gets in the car, she jumps in the back seat, and I was like, again, 8th grade, right? I was like, how was it? She goes, not for me. I'm not doing it. And I said, okay. I said, are you sure? She goes, yeah, it's just, ugh, it's not me. I don't want to do it. And I said, okay. And it was fascinating because the moment she told her friends that she didn't want to do it, they were like, but you should, but you're so this, but you're so great. Now, what was even more fascinating was how you never know who's listening, and you never know whose parent is listening. Because I happened to be in the office at the school because I was substituting at the time, and the coach who was coaching that particular dance team started talking about my daughter, but not knowing that I'm her mom.
Ooh,
Right?
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it was like, because my daughter had already decided she didn't want to do it and this and this and that. And so they started talking about how she was missing out. She was going to be regretful that she didn't be a part of this team. And it was just interesting because I just sat there and listened. I was like, oh, this is fun. Right? Because I don't have anything to defend my daughter for. My daughter made a decision. And I've always told my children, I will stand by whatever decisions you make, good or bad. Right? Those are not my choices, but I'm only here to
Yeah.
guide you along the way. But her knowing herself then was like such a moment for me, that I had raised a child who could say in the 8th grade, that is not for me. I don't want to do it. I do not care what other people have to say.
Right. Let's build on this. I want to come. That's so beautiful about what you just said. And Jessica's. I know you built what you were your response based on what Jessica was providing. Um, What's so great about what you're saying is you're instilling a foundation of trusting yourself and inquiry, right? Being
Mhm,
able to say in that situation, I can hear what's happening in the world. I can bring my own perspective to it and I can learn it. You're teaching at a very early age how to exercise that muscle. And
mhm,
that's why I'm trying to say that it is a muscle.
mhm,
Easier said than done sometimes. Because
mhm,
sometimes the muscle, your best efforts are going to be producing results that are not necessarily to your liking. But
right,
when you're still able to say, well, you know what, I still know this information is true for me. uh,
mhm,
Most of us don't have, at this particular age, a parent voice in our head that allows that inquiry to take place. So
right,
the foundation that you're laying for your kids is that even though modernity, as we like to call it, will try to condition that voice out of them, well,
mhm,
well, you should do this, you should do this, you should do that. And we begin to take it on as our
mhm,
own identity, that we should be able to do that. And we discount the voice that's in our side, inside our head. We listen to the people uh, they seem to be thinking all the other girls in school are doing all this other stuff. I should probably do all. So, we have all of these pressures, right?
mhm,
So that's what I'm trying to say. This is a muscle. And for those of us who don't have compassionate parent voices around us or in our heads, this is something that I invite people to say out loud to themselves,
mhm,
right? To give yourself permission to speak to yourself sometimes when you are faced with something. Because I'm sure you both know what I'm going to say is, gosh, I'm so stupid. I have no idea why I keep doing this. Well,
mhm.
often my mouth because I want to be able to say that, right? Um, but if I talk to myself in a compassionate way, well, I think people might think I'm crazy. But I actually, when I first started doing what's right about this that I'm not seeing, I tried to hear that voice inside my head. But
Mhm,
this morning, I actually said it out loud when as it related to my wallet, which
mhm,
was, all right, what's right about this that I'm not seeing?
mhm,
So I'm auditorily triggered. And if I present that question, hey, what's right about this that I'm not seeing?
mhm, mhm.
Let it land, and I can be that compassionate parent with myself again.
Absolutely. And I will say there's a class that I went through. It's called Have Your Own Back. It's by Laura Jacobs. Actually, she teaches that. She actually has a class coming up in March. Shameless plug there, but she has a class coming up in March. And she has taught me to when we go into that negative self-talk, we're like, oh, I'm so stupid, or oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. All those things that I've said them too, because don't get me wrong, I've said them as well. I no longer say them because I go, wow, that was really cute of you saying. That was really, you know what? You are a genius. Why didn't you think of that sooner? Okay. It's perfect. But it's like giving yourself, like you were talking about, Jamie, that love to yourself to sort of,
Yeah.
instead of saying something negative, because again, if you go in the mirror and you say, well, wow, you're pretty stupid saying, that's like, who's doing that? Right. So I just go, oh, that was really cute that you didn't take the meat out to have for dinner tonight. So now we've got to figure something else out. Well, what do we want to eat? Right.
Yeah.
So just taking that and just a shift. It's always just a
Hmm.
tiny tweak, right?
Right.
It's one thing. You pick one thing, right? If you get up in the morning and you say, you know, what's the one thing I want to feel today? Because nobody gets up in the morning and says, you know what, I think I like to be angry all day today. I've never said that. I hope no one else has, but if
Well, but sometimes we don't know how to dig ourselves out of those situations because, again, we'll find ourselves in that and we want to, again, because we're problem solvers. I'm
Mhm,
going to sit here and figure out what the problem is. And the
mhm,
only way that you can solve a problem, here's the magic, here's the secret sauce for this particular discussion. The
mhm,
only way to solve a problem is to stay focused on the problem.
mhm,
And so the 180 flip of saying what's right about this situation is there to kind of get you to shift your perspective,
mhm,
right? And
mhm.
whatever angle that perspective may take, right? And I think it might be something that we could kind of invite people to do in their week as they're kind of after they've listened to this is to just practice saying it out loud.
Yeah.
Let that, you leapt over that just a second and say, well, I'm going to get up this morning and say, what else is possible with my day, and to really recognize that it's a muscle to be exercised. It's a
Mhm.
somatic thing. It's not just, well, I'm going to sit around and practice positive thinking and then I will magically manifest all these things in my life. It's a muscle. It's a muscle that you have to be able to say, let me pick a small moment in
Right.
my week this week and say to myself, what's right about this that I'm not seeing?
Mhm,
I've already identified this is a problem. This isn't something I can easily I can go back and stay focused on what the problem, what caused this, what did I do, reduce it all back down to some kind of solvable thing. But wait, what's right about it? What are the fresh perspectives that are emerging if I give myself that extra space, hear that parental voice that says, all right, what'd you learn? What's
mhm,
perspectives? How does that land with people?
mm. Go ahead, Ray.
Oh, I was just going to say, I just like the path we've just taken. Is what can the problem teach us? What is the problem saying? So
Mhm,
that we're teaching ourselves to, okay, that it's not all negative, that I have something to contribute, that I'm not stupid automatically, not to default to stupid, but to look at, hey, what did I actually do right?
Mhm.
mhm,
Or it's not just because you have a problem doesn't mean it's your fault.
That's right.
mhm,
These things happen. So being with the situation, being with ourselves is we if we merge all that together, it's about a new way of seeing and a new way of looking for other
Right.
perspectives,
Yeah.
as Sang has demonstrated.
Yeah,
mhm,
you wait for those answers that surprise you. You notice what blocks the flip, right? That comes up when you say, "Well, what's right about this that I'm not saying?" Um,
mhm,
and you notice what is trying to emerge when you say it again, and you try anyway, right? Um,
mhm,
and I think that that's the angel's advocate work, right?
mhm,
Deliberately, if you will, arguing for what's working when your default conditioning is to keep scanning for a problem. And it's a practice. And I think that, magical pop psychology has taught us that, well, if I just think differently, I will be differently. And I think that's a seed of an idea, but it has to be a somatic process, right? It has to integrate. It's a skill. It's a muscle. And with any practice that you're involved in, it gets better the more you do it, the
mhm,
more you embody it, right? And
mhm,
it's because I know that, especially saying when you speak from your experience, when we speak from our lived experience, when Ray speaks from his perspectives, to be able to look at those abstractions and those concepts that we're talking about, it brings so much more richness to our lives, right?
mhm.
And you're able to then you feel it. You actually sometimes go, you'll know something has really been integrated with somebody, and they go,
Mm.
there's sort of satisfaction humming with it all.
Right. Right. And I will say, I'm going to share this. There's three questions I usually ask myself in the mornings, right? When I get up. And it's again been a process to try and figure this out. Cause people always say, like, what's your favorite candy? And I go, it depends on my mood. Cause Sometimes I want M&Ms, sometimes I want Snickers, right? Like sometimes I want a protein bar. So I think when I get up in the morning, it's moving your body, right? Doing the somatic movements for sure. And then saying, what do I want to feel today? Right? What do I want to feel? And whether that's I want to feel seen, I want to feel loved, I want to feel, and then taking that one question. There's 3 questions, but I'm only going to drop one today. What do I want to feel today? And then think of that feeling that you want to have. And then anything that you do throughout the day, is this helping me feel that? Right? If I want to feel happy, but then someone asks me to volunteer and do something that I really don't want to do that makes me unhappy, right? It's pausing and going, okay, hold on, wait a second. Can I say no to this and still be happy? The answer is yes. It's that stuff we have to get, past for ourselves, which again, a process, but asking yourself, is this helping me feel what I want to feel today?
Yeah. Yeah, the process of inquiry,
Mhm.
and it shows up everywhere for ourselves because there's oftentimes newness in the moment, the fresher perspective.
Mhm.
And that's the thing that I love so much about inquiry is that, even though you asked yourself that question yesterday, there's something new that comes up. You stay open to those fresh perspectives. You don't look at them as, well, I had the answer I had yesterday has got to be the answer that I had today because that's what I've done before and that's what I'm going to continue to do. And gosh darn it, I'm going to stick to it because it's what I know. And when we challenge that from a from again recognizing that there's a lot of conditioning that goes on up here, but there's also a lot of behavior and ritual that happens here,
Absolutely.
right? And part of that is if we are someone who is waking up alone or finding ourselves in situations where we're relying on our own perspectives,
Mhm.
self inquiry, saying it out loud, literally listening to see what emerges, being that voice of the compassionate parent for yourself. Sometimes I know it's very popular for people to put on those headphones and listen to things, right? But all of that is designed to work for you on what your level is in terms of coming up with those fresher perspectives.
Right.
Right? Say.
No, you're good. I'm agreeing.
Well, I'm going to leave Sang's questions as the way to leave this particular inquiry because the we could teach a class on how to develop your daily ritual, and you
Mhm.
could I'm going to invoke the name Joe Blow again. The Joe Blow School of self awareness, which says begin your day with these thoughts. I have a millionaire's mindset, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do all of that. And they give you the answers as to what you're supposed to be inquiring about because I've done all the research and I can tell you these are the most effective things for you to believe. But what you do in those moments by going to the Joe Blow School of Self Awareness is you bypass what is the magic of not only the Sang D method of approaching your daily life, but
Mhm.
the idea that Sang is an evolving woman, right? And
Mhm.
so there are different circumstances under which that question is going to be answered. And
Right.
the muscle of self-reliance is what builds.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Love it.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to.
No, I just love it because there again is I think you've added a new dynamic to the inquiry process. Is that what one question does not fit all?
Mhm.
It's about what is it to me in the moment, and how is it different now than it was previously or will be. I think that's a huge gift
Right.
because
And
it's not the rigidity of the approach. It's the flexibility of and the energetic dynamic aspect of the approach.
well, my deep thanks and appreciation to both of you again for opening yourselves up to this question and being able to hold the container for inquiry for not only ourselves but for others. Anything that we'd like to add before we close out this particular gathering?
No, other than, our bodies don't wake up the same every day. Yesterday my body was like, hello, you did too much the day before. This morning, I don't know what's been going on because I've been really up and off and on since midnight, but that's something else. Not in pain or anything, but just, there's been a lot going on, nothing bad. So just honoring, I think, your body and listening to your body. And we'll talk more about that because that's why I wasn't here last week. But but listening and honoring your body and really being honest
Right.
self.
Well, there's some exciting things coming up for all of us. And we're very grateful again, as always, to the Breakthrough Show Network and Jessica Dukas for allowing us to have this time of inquiry on the Breakthrough Show Network. And we are actually looking at new ways to be able to have this conversation. If you are interested in joining us in studio, there are ways to do that. Just go to RiseandShineSundays.com. There's information on there as to how you can connect with us and contact us. But we also know that what's emerging will be a way in which we can now begin to engage you in the conversation where we can all be in the same room to be able to do this weekly inquiry that we call Rise and Shine Sundays. Yeah. So stay tuned for more of that. Spirit Sessions is coming up at the top of the hour. Again, we are very grateful to the Breakthrough Show Network for our home, and there's always a time every Sunday morning for you to rise and shine with inquiry. So my thanks to you both, and we'll see you all back here next week.
See you next week.